Tim Hauraney, week 2 in Bahrain, and this week is a race week, baby. So excited. I'm so excited, Tim. We got practice tomorrow. We got testing. There's a qualifying, Friday, and then a race Saturday. Why is the race Saturday, by the way?
I think it has to do with Ramadan that takes place on the Sunday. Because like when they go to Saudi Arabia for the next race weekend, same thing happens. It goes until Saturday, and then Saturday is the race, and then Sunday again everybody sort of flies out. But yeah, it's
I see.
That's why it's happening.
Well, that makes sense. Okay. Now, Tim, obviously the big news today is the ongoing investigation into Christian Horner and alleged inappropriate and controlling conduct. And I say alleged because that's what was alleged. The investigation is wrapped up. Now, we've heard any number of rumors. We've heard that there is a Jos Verstappen and Helmut Marko camp trying to politically push Christian out. We've heard that the Salzburg Red Bull headquarters and the Thai Red Bull headquarters have gone head-to-head over this issue. We've heard obviously with Formula One, one of the things that we really love is the rampant speculation and the drama and the rumors. This one was too serious to really enjoy things like that. You kind of want to just get to the conclusion. Even the Ford Motor Company in Detroit sent a public letter and made public comments about the fact that they wanted Red Bull to be more open with the investigation and tell everybody what the heck happened. And I'm sure that Red Bull and Ford are having those discussions right now. But as of, Wednesday, February 28th, mid-afternoon here, evening in Bahrain, where you are, Christian Horner has been cleared of any of those allegations, and he will remain as team principal. And, I think obviously this was something that would have been hanging over Red Bull had it gone any longer. These processes do take time. It's good that you give them the time that they need. What are your takeaways from this story? What are you hearing? What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, like the fact that it took, 8 weeks. The facts that it was handled by an outside barrister, right, Adam? Like it wasn't done through internal matters. It was handled by an outsourced outside of Christian Horner camp, Red Bull Racing, Red Bull GmbH. Like it was all handled by an outside barrister to take care of everything. It's just, I think like at the end of the day, like, and if you haven't, folks who are watching or listening, if you haven't read or heard what the statement was that came out, I think one of the things that a lot of us wanted at the end of the day was just some transparency over like what the heck's going on here, because we didn't necessarily really get it. We were getting different pieces of different things, and there was a ton of gray area, and there was never anything concrete or certain. And I think for a reporter, journalist, trying to, do their due diligence, it's very difficult. I think even for Formula One, it's like, I think at the end of the day, I'd be interested to know if they end up looking into this, or the FIA, I should say, ends up looking into it to see everything. And, you had mentioned Ford. I wonder what Ford is going to have to say about all of this as well. They were putting the pressure on Red Bull to get this thing wrapped up, and it was firm pressure as well. And that's a company I think you don't want to lose. Like if you're Formula One, like you want these big OEMs coming in to your sport, and an OEM as big as Ford, if they are unhappy with whatever the findings are from all of this, then like, I don't know, see you later. Right. And that's not good for F1. And so as a whole, not just Red Bull Racing, right? It's for F1, like it's not good. So, none of us know where this is going to go next, if it's going to go anywhere, if it's done. We have no idea. Basically, this statement kind of just says like, hey, we did all this, we did the due diligence, we have all of this stuff, we went through this full process. And this isn't from like Red Bull Racing, right? Like, people need to know that there are the two different entities here. We have Red Bull Racing, but this is from like top. This is from the top. This is from Red Bull.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the company that runs and owns all the Red Bull properties and marketing, everything. This is it's one of those things. I'm sure they wanted to get this decided one way or another before the season starts. I mean, this is a championship winning team in a way that we've never seen in the history of the sport. So unbelievably dominant, winning every race but one last year, and looking like they've got the fastest car by, I mean, it's been speculated. It seems a lot. 7 tenths, 8 tenths. Like, how fast? You've seen the car. You've been at testing. How fast is it?
I mean, from what everybody's saying, it's like, I mean, from what some of the teams are saying, it's like a lap faster. And I just like can't believe that. I mean, that is, if we go through the regulation, I mean, that's just so far off in the distance. I have a feeling though, Adam, like when going trackside, getting to see these cars up close and personal, I mean, you get a different understanding of what everybody's got. You get a different understanding of what the cars can do. For Red Bull in particular, like I was saying on the podcast a little while ago, great coming out of slow corners, always good in high speed stuff, and again, mega down a straightaway. And so those are kind of like all those boxes ticked off. It's like tick, tick, tick. We're good all the way through. And I think it's just going to come down to the teams and how they develop the cars. That's going to be the most important factor within the season to try and catch, Red Bull. Now, are they going to start with like a second advantage over everybody? No, I doubt it. But they are going to have an advantage. I mean, let's be honest. They started production of this car, building this car like way back in like June, right? June of last year. They were dumping resources into this thing, trying to evolve what they already have. And look, they've shown up to the track with like little components from, Mercedes' W14 that they
which
have
has got to just
on,
eat at them, by the way.
Yeah, right. That they've taken and evolved, right? So I'm going to be really fascinated when we see everything kind of shake out during free practice 2 and in qualifying. Ferrari, Adam, I think they've got something for Ferrari. I just don't know if it's going to be big enough. I mean, I talked to Charles Leclerc today about it, and I literally said to him, like, hey, like, do you think Red Bull is beatable anytime this year? And he didn't even have an answer. He's like, look, none of us know. He's like, the only time we are going to find out what they actually have is after this first race. He said, once this first race is done, then I can then come back and ask me again, and then I can tell you.
Now, we're going to do our predictions a little bit in a few minutes here. The reason I ask about the Red Bull car and how fast it is, obviously, is everybody's concerned. It's like, oh man, the season's already over. Like, and I know you did a whole podcast on it with Nate Saunders and so many other great people that were on the last episode. I wanted to talk to you about Checo Perez because Checo's comments today where he's like, oh, a lot of people are saying we're like 8 tenths faster. We're not. Like, don't listen to that. It sounds an awful lot like Lewis Hamilton during the Mercedes runs where he'd be like, yeah, I'm not happy with the car. And then bang, he'd be lapping people on like the first half of the race, and you'd never see him again the entire year. Are they downplaying this car?
I don't, I don't think so. I mean, you can see that, the drivers and the team personnel in the garage, and they all have smiles on their faces. Nobody's really hiding the fact that they know they have a great car. And so I think for them, I think they know they have an advantage. I just don't know if they even know how big their advantage is. Like, they may have an idea, but that's why I think Sergio's kind of like holding back on what he wants to say. And yeah, I heard what you're talking about when you did say that. And I kind of tend to agree with him because nobody really knows. A lot of the teams believe that the gaps have closed and Red Bull still has an advantage, but the size of that advantage is what, everyone does not know.
I think, Tim, this is why I love this part of the year, because there's an assumption that we already know how it's going to go. And the reality is that Max didn't have to win as many races as he did last year. Sergio didn't. There were races where Sergio's confidence was down, or he didn't perform, or he made a mistake. And that Red Bull car is a ton faster, or was a ton faster than most of the rest of the field. And yet he sometimes didn't make the podium. And so, it speaks to the fact that Max Verstappen was literally almost mistake-free, with the exception of Singapore last year, and how dominant he was as a driver. And so I'm kind of excited to see if Max makes a mistake and somebody takes advantage, and where the cars all sit this year. So obviously the second thing I wanted to touch on, Fernando Alonso speaking to reporters a little earlier today, and they were asking him about, what his plans were for next year, because nobody could come right out and be like, are you going to be the Mercedes driver? Although he seems like a viable option, along with Ocon and a few other people, and maybe Kimi Antonelli. He said, I have to decide if I want to race next year. Where do you think Fernando Alonso stands on that? He's 42, and it's a lot of work, and he has switched to a plant-based diet, and a lot has been made of his fitness over the last couple of years. Where do you think Fernando is on that scale of leaning towards retiring or leaning towards sticking around?
I think he needs to, for himself, I think he needs to see what this season has in store for the team, and then himself. We have to remember that it's the longest season in the history of Formula One. It's 24 races. That is a ton of races. And Fernando even saying hey, I remember when it was just going to be 20, or was supposed to be just 20 races. He's like, now we're at 24. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit much, essentially, is what he had said. And you know what? I think there's a lot of people in Formula One and a lot of teams who agree with him. And same with drivers. Verstappen doesn't want to do any more races. He doesn't want to go over 24 races. He doesn't even want to go anywhere near 24 races. It's too many. So I think even as a sport, it needs to look at itself and say, is this too much? Is 24 races is it sustainable? And I think for Fernando, that's the thing. Is this, sport lifestyle / athlete at 42 years old, 24 races, traveling the world, you're away from your family for well over most of the year, not well over half of it too. You're away from friends and family. And you have to wonder, and if he's thinking, is this sustainable for me? And so I think for Fernando, that's kind of where he's sort of at. He's happy at Aston Martin. He's happy with the project that he's got going on there. Would a move to Mercedes make him that much more happier? I doubt it. I mean, is he going to go to Mercedes and all of a sudden they're going to start winning? I mean, probably not, because that's why Lewis Hamilton, one of the reasons I think Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes is because he probably sees the writing on the wall. This is a team that's a few years away from being back to where they were, and I don't have those few years. And so I think when I look at Fernando, I think that's something similar to him. If Aston Martin's able to keep making good progress, then I think that keeps him around. I think that entices him maybe to stay until 2026. But for now, I mean, it's all talk at the moment until we hit the track and see what happens there.
And it's interesting, Tim, that you say that, because if he goes from Aston Martin to Mercedes, he's all of a sudden, he's still Fernando Alonso, but they're not listening to him at Mercedes the way they would at Aston Martin, right? I was thinking about this today. If 100%. You're Fernando, they brought you there to help mature the team. They want you to help Lance. They want you to help their engineers. They want you to instill a winning culture. Mercedes doesn't really necessarily need that sort of teaching. They've got the pedigree, but also if you listen to Lewis Hamilton, even in Drive to Survive, he's like, they didn't listen to me. And if we're not listening to Lewis Hamilton, you're not listening to Fernando Alonso. Right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of, so, Fernando, I get the sense, is quite vocal behind the scenes and wants what he wants when he wants it. And he's well within his rights to ask for that. He's one of the best drivers in the sport even now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, I sat down and spoke with Mike Crack about this today, who's the team principal for Aston Martin, and yeah, we talked a lot about Fernando and essentially, the importance of keeping him at the team because of his level of experience. He is the most experienced driver on the grid. And you need that as a young team that's building and wanting to win a championship and get to that level. You need a driver like that. You need a driver that's won 2 world championships and knows how to get it done and knows what it takes to be in a championship battle, especially one, 2 that he was in against Michael Schumacher. So the guy knows how to get it done, right? Like he's been in this battle for long enough that he knows what he needs and he knows what the team needs to get things done. I think for him, again, it's waiting to see how things play out with the team. Where is the car when they start the season? How aggressive does the team get with upgrades? Because that is going to be a very big storyline this season, or upgrades, and to see where they shake out. And then obviously the team, Aston Martin, they want to keep him. They want him at the team.
Right. Yeah, and they'd be willing to spend to do it. I think Lawrence
Lawrence
got the money.
I think they would do it. I think so.
Yeah, so let's talk about predictions. And I think I want to start with season predictions, and then we'll do Bahrain predictions after, because we're going to, we got to talk about the actual race that's going to happen. But Tim, this is a really unfair thing to throw at you, and we're going to do it. I'm going to drop you mine too. I'm going to be super unfair
I like how
about
you just started with, this is really unfair for you.
Yeah, it's completely unfair. Who are, from 3 to 1, the top 3 drivers at the end of this season in points?
Oh, man.
Unfair.
3?
Top 3. Give me a top 3. You're lucky I didn't ask for top 5. Behind the scenes here, they're like, push them for top 5. Push them. I'm doing top 3, Tim.
Man, top 3 in points. Okay, I'm going to start at number 1, Max Verstappen.
Okay.
Then I'm going Charles Leclerc.
Okay.
And then I'm going Sergio Perez.
So isn't it interesting that you say that? I wondered if you would. And the reason I say it's interesting is because Helmut Marko, who loves to talk, loves to speak to the German newspapers. He said in an interview that Sergio Perez will be in the conversation to keep that seat if he finishes second. He also said that Yuki Tsunoda has a chance. Daniel Ricciardo has a chance. We're pretty sure that one of them is moving out because Liam Lawson has to race next year. Otherwise, he's leaving.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
I agree.
And Liam Lawson should be, by all rights, in this year. But there's reasons why certain drivers, it happens every year, right? There's a driver that should get in that isn't. And so for Daniel Ricciardo to be considered for that seat, Daniel's got to have... they said he's got to have Yuki Tsunoda well under control. And I think he's probably relying a little bit on being a surprise. And then he also has to rely on Sergio Perez finishing 3rd or lower in that superior Red Bull car. Because, for Sergio, just like last year, there's not really an excuse not to finish second, at least from this viewpoint, right? If the car is that much better. So I'm curious about the Red Bull driving maneuverability here in terms of drivers. Do you think that Sergio Perez has the same struggles as he did last year and has the loss of confidence and has the inconsistency? Or does Charles Leclerc just race to the absolute max the way that we think he can? Less brain farts this year, less odd crashes here and there that you weren't expecting, and he just outperforms him.
That's really, it's a great way you put it, because we saw what happened with Sergio last year when he lost his way with the car, and I think he was doing things that he probably shouldn't be doing with the car, like i.e. trying to utilize Max's setups they're kind of for Max. They're not for you, man. Like, you got your own thing. You got to get this car closer to what you do. He did end the season on a pretty high note. Sergio did. I think like he's a capable driver. I like Sergio. I think he's a talented guy. He's a Formula One driver. Is he on the same level as Max Verstappen? No, he's not. But can he get the car closer to him? Can he fight Max? I mean, we need that this season for sure, as like an audience and the fans. We definitely need that. I just don't know. I just don't know if he can. I don't know if he can do that. What I do know is that Charles Leclerc inked a long-term deal with Ferrari. Charles Leclerc's coming into this season. The car looks good. Their long runs look really good, considering like this is what hampered them last year. They still look like they have the raw pace that they had last year. And remember, like they won some poles last year, and hey, like they did pretty good in some races. Carlos Sainz, Singapore, Charles Leclerc was the faster driver in Vegas, probably should have won that race. So I think like Ferrari has something here. That's why I put Leclerc P2. He's a talented driver. There's no question about it. He's hungry. There's no question about that. Frederick Vasseur really believes in him. That's why he's got this long-term deal. But for Leclerc, he was pretty open and honest with us when we asked him about all of this stuff. And for him, it was he wanted to know what the direction of the team was. He loves Ferrari. And what he said to us is essentially he thinks and he does with his heart. And he said with this decision that he had made, he didn't do it that way. He did it from the standpoint that I need to see where the team's going. What are we doing to get to win? To get to win? What are we doing to make me a champion? What is the team doing behind the scenes? And I think he saw all of that. He actually did some deep thinking about this and came to the realization that this is where he has the best chance of potentially winning a championship, i.e. that's why, you see Lewis Hamilton all of a sudden starting to, he's coming over to Ferrari too, right? So
bit of an endorsement.
I just don't know. I think there's some good stuff going on there though, Adam. I think Ferrari's got something good cooking, and that's why I put Charles ahead of Sergio.
Give me your top 3 teams at the end of the season this year in total points.
Okay, I'm going to go Red Bull again. They're going to be hard to beat. I mean, I think they'll get pushed. I just think they're going to be hard to beat. Okay, Red Bull, Ferrari. P3 is an interesting one because we don't know what Mercedes has right now, Adam. Like we don't. I think like a lot of us, we didn't get to see them do any long runs during testing, which is pretty wild because that's, you want to make sure you're dialing in your long runs, but they never really did long runs. So I'm not too sure what they've got. Some people think that they're holding back big time. I don't know. I mean, talking to George Russell today, just, George is kind of like, hey, we're starting from sort of ground zero with this new platform, which is good. We really like it, but it's ground zero. We need more downforce on this thing. We need more development on it, and then it will eventually be good. So that's why I'm putting Mercedes, back a bit. I put them back in my power rankings on SportsCenter. I'm saying McLaren P3. That's what I'm saying.
Wow. So a return to the 2020 or 2021 form when it was Carlando.
Yeah, and the one thing is that I don't think McLaren's going to be super competitive right out of the gates. I think it's going to be similar to last year where they started to come on strong by race 7, race 8, Austria, whatever Austria was, in and around Austria and then onwards. I think it's going to be something similar, only it's going to be sooner. Like we're talking maybe race 4, we start to see.
Is there a reason for that?
Things start to snowball. Yeah, it's really funny. Like, how do you do that 2 years in a row? Right? When you show up to the track and like, you got a decent car, but you know that it needs and requires upgrades for it to kind of take that next step. And like McLaren was able to just take such a massive step that you have to wonder is like, well, is it going to be the same again this year? I mean, they have a good platform, so I don't see why not. But yeah, it's a great question, Adam. And that's something that I've been meaning to ask Andrea Stella is like, why is it that, this is the second time, like second around that, you guys have brought upgrades to this car a little late. This isn't really the full car. And when you do, you're hitting home runs. That's what I want to know. I want to know if it's kind of like, hey, we're going to take what we got, we're going to put it onto the track, we're going to see what it can do, and then we're going to see if what we're working on correlates with what's telling us on the racetrack. Maybe it's something like that. So they execute on everything. They don't waste time, money, resources.
I won't ask you. I won't ask you the lowest point totals because I always feel like that's unfair. But sorry for drivers. Because like if you have one bad team, that both drivers could be in the bottom three. I want to know, in terms of performance, end of the season, who's got the least amount of points in terms of teams? Who are the three teams that make up the back? And
this is
8, 9, and 10. Who are they?
That's a good one. Okay, so I put Alpine 8th in my power rankings. And I've talked to some people over the past few days. And I think I might put them down a little lower than that, Adam. They might be one of the worst teams on the grid. But from what I've heard.
Wow.
Wow.
So who would be ahead of? So if you put them lower, if they're 9th,
Haas might be ahead of them, Adam.
Haas might be ahead of Alpine?
Might be, yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Because
to start the season.
Okay. At the end of the season, though, where are we talking here?
Oh, God, that's a good one. That's really tough.
And sorry, I should have given you my top 3 in terms of drivers.
No, I think it's going to be Max. Hear those.
Sorry, I should have said Max, Checo, and if Ferrari's really got it going on, just for fun, let's say Carlos Sainz. Because he had a great year last year.
So for people who don't know, so this guy on the other end of this Zoom record, this is why you should listen to him, for those watching and listening, told us that Alex Albon was going to be like hot shit this year, or in 2023. Mm-hmm. He was cracking Adam's top 10. He was going to be one of the best drivers on the grid. And sure enough, this guy was right. So, sorry. Continue, Adam.
Well, and it's because they finally gave him a car, too. But Albon, to me, I'm a fan. I'm a fan. He's much more mature than he was at Red Bull in terms of his driving. Great driver. I say Carlos Sainz because I think he's going to be a bat out of hell. And I actually think this is such an important year for him, right? Charles obviously it's an important year. Of course, it's an important year. But Carlos, it's like this is a do or die in terms of contract. Like he's going to have a great contract waiting for him. But the difference between making $10 million and $20 million is what's on the table for Carlos Sainz, or $20 million and $30 million, right? Okay. I think if you're Carlos Sainz at the end of this season, you want Mercedes offering you a deal. You want probably Sauber, Audi, whatever they're going to be, like Stake F1 offering you a deal. You probably want, if the Alpine experiment explodes, which I think it will, Gasly and Ocon, like that can't last forever. I think you want them making an offer to you. Like if you're Carlos Sainz, your entire job should be, I need Sauber and I need Mercedes to fight for me. I need them to fight for me. I need there to be a bidding war. And he won the only race that Red Bull didn't win last year. Tim, you've talked about for years how fast this guy is, but there have been brain farts, and there have been moments on teams where, he's not the A1 driver. He wasn't at Renault. He wasn't at McLaren. He certainly wasn't at Toro Rosso, because Max was there, and that's the guy that was their guy. And, potentially an outside shot at that Red Bull second seat. Not that it could happen, but it could happen, right? He was a Red Bull junior driver. It could happen. If I'm him, I am laser focused this year. Oh, Lewis Hamilton's coming in? Well, I'm going to make you regret that. And that, I think, will establish Carlos Sainz as an elite driver in this sport if he hasn't been like that already. So that's why I'm going with that. Teams, I'm in total agreement with you. I think it's going to be Red Bull. I think it's going to be Ferrari, and I think it's going to be McLaren, because I think Mercedes, I think that they are 2 years late to the party with this new concept, right? This new concept that they're going to should have been the concept 2 years ago. And it doesn't mean it won't be fast, and it doesn't mean George and Lewis aren't amazing drivers, and I want to see Lewis win another race desperately in a Mercedes car. I really do. I don't know. I'm struggling with that. What McLaren were really good at last year, and this is why I picked them over Mercedes, is they were points merchants. They were always smart about getting as many points as they could get. Yeah, Lewis and George are going to be full throttle against each other. It doesn't mean that they hate each other, but they are not fighting for the team this year. They're not. Lewis is fighting. This is I want to win a driver's championship. I got a couple years left. That's got to be his only focus. George is fighting. I'm going to be Mercedes team leader next year, no matter who walks through that door. If it's Fernando Alonso, if it's Esteban Ocon, if it's Carlos Sainz, if it's whoever, Daniel Ricciardo, like whatever it is, whoever it is, that's how George has to think. And so I think Mercedes, the brand and the team, will lose some points based on that, because I think Oscar and Lando are working in a team a little bit better than George and Lewis will, just because of their motivation. So that's why I'm picking what I'm picking. I don't know if that's crazy, but that's what I'm going.
No, it's well thought out. I really like that. It's funny you say, Lewis and George like potentially sort of clashing. Or we went in to speak with George today, and it was funny. It was we were asking about the car and all this other stuff, and like, you remember when Lewis was telling us that, hey, I told this team I wanted changes. They never did the changes that I wanted. And here we are. This is what we've got. That was with the W14. Now with the W15, George was saying like, yeah, Lewis got his, I'm paraphrasing here, he had said more than this. It was like, yeah, Lewis got the changes that he wanted. The changes that Lewis wanted are on the car. Lewis wanted the seat position moved back, so the seat position has been moved back a little bit. And then he kind of went on to be like, oh, but like the car does feel good. And
oh boy,
he made sure to say like, hey, this is kind of a Lewis Hamilton car, is basically what he said. But he backed it up by saying he is one of the most experienced drivers on the grid. He has a lot more experience than even some of our engineers do. He's been racing in Formula One than some of our engineers have even been in Formula One. And so he kind of backed it up with that. But like up to that point, we all were kind of like, okay.
That's where it's like, that's not mine. I was part of the group project, but I really didn't participate. It's not mine.
And essentially is what it was.
I think the three slowest cars, the Alpine one doesn't surprise me. I think that they're a mess on the inside, and hiring somebody who's never run a race team, never really been involved in racing, I think is a mistake. He seems like a nice guy. Like, you see him on Drive to Survive. He's not like a maniac or something, but Otmar needed more time. So I think so here are my bottom three teams. Are you ready? This is difficult. I think we're going to see a Racing Bulls improvement big time this year. Okay. Keep doing that thumbs up bubble. I don't know why that does. Does that show up in the actual thing too?
It's great. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. So I think that we're not going to see them in the bottom anymore. Now, what does that leave us with? That leaves us with Haas. Okay.
Yep.
Right. And what else?
Williams,
who I think could have a really improved team. Right? Should.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult one.
Yep.
And that leaves me with Sauber. I think that I have questions about the Sauber car. So here's where I'm going to rank them. And this is going to be controversial,
all right.
Tim. All right, you ready? So last place I'm going to give to Haas. As Will Buxton said on Drive to Survive, they're bringing a spoon to a gunfight. Okay? Second last, I'm giving to Sauber. Kick Sauber. And that's what's going to be really interesting when the Carlos Sainz contract negotiations come down to the wire, because what is their plan not to be there? They've gotten progressively worse, right? You had Kimi Räikkönen and Charles Leclerc, and that was the best driver lineup I think that team has ever had, and even then it wasn't great. And they've progressively been worse since then, right? Then you got Alpine, and I feel bad for Pierre Gasly because he's basically left a 7th place team or an 8th place team to join another 7th or an 8th place team. But it isn't the way that Alpine speaks about Alpine. It's a way that other people speak about Alpine. If you ask people in the paddock, like the Christian Horner quote from Drive to Survive, he's like, yeah, it's always been kind of a mystery what goes on over there. Doesn't that say it all? It says everything.
I mean,
and you've got two different factories, one in Enstone. Where's the French side?
Yeah, you have one in France.
Like, I don't know, man. You're building the car one spot and the engine somewhere else. Like, this is that you could get away with that. Renault could get away with that 20 years ago. Sure. Yep. What the hell? Right? You're going up against Minardi. You're going up against Jordan. Benetton's, on its way out. That's fine. This is not the way this operates anymore. You got to look at how Zach Brown would operate a team, like, because he's like the most North American of all these guys. Sports franchise, right? Like the Toronto Maple Leafs have the Toronto Marlies in Toronto. They used to have them in St. John's, Newfoundland. And then at another point, they were like on the other. You need to have your factory, your minor league system, everything all closed in together and your team all working together. And until Alpine/Renault figure that out, and either move the entire facility to England where all the talent is, right? I'm assuming that's why it's all there. There's a lot of talent, a lot of teams there, or move it all to France. They're going to have trouble. They have lots of trouble. So anyway, now Tim, this is my favorite one. You ready? Predictions. I think we got like 12 drivers coming off contract, 11 drivers coming off contract. What move is the most? Take Lewis Hamilton off the board. You can't use that one. It's a cheat code. No. What's the most shocking move on the grid end of the season or during the season?
Woo! It's got to be for that Red Bull seat, right? It has to be for the Red Bull seat, I think.
Who's your pick?
Oh gosh, that is even like more difficult. If I think it's going to come down to either Alex Albon or Esteban Ocon. Some people are talking up Kimi Antonelli, who is Mercedes.
Oh, you mean Mercedes or Red Bull? You said Red Bull.
Did I say Red Bull? Oh my god, I'm such an idiot.
Meant Mercedes.
I'm going to do two. Forget it. I'm doing two.
Do it.
Just because Mercedes first, I think, is going to be one of the biggest stories in terms of the drivers moving laterally. That's got to be. It's either going to be Esteban Ocon or Alex Albon, and that's going to come down to however good one of those two drivers does within the season. That's what I think determines who gets that seat. I don't think it's going to be Kimi Antonelli. He has to have one hell of a Formula 2 season, I think, to get that seat. But who knows? He could do it. Now, as for the Red Bull seat, Sergio Perez, obviously out of contract at the end of the year. Honestly, if Daniel Ricciardo, talking to Daniel today, it was interesting because for him, he doesn't want to think about the Red Bull Racing seat, even though he does, if that makes any sense. But
it's his goal.
Him, he's just trying to. Yeah, I think for him, he feels that by putting that type of pressure on himself, it may detract from performance. It may set him back a bit. And I think for him, he wants to be a little free because that's the way Daniel Ricciardo is. That's how he drives the best. It's when he's loose. He doesn't have a lot of pressure on him. There isn't a lot of things happening around him or in his bubble. And that's how he's able to extract performance from himself. I think if Daniel's able to, keep Yuki under control, if he's able to be the leader at that team, if he's able to score more points, if he's able to be successful, consistent, the Daniel Ricciardo of old, I think he comes back to Red Bull Racing.
Okay.
Big seat.
Okay. All right. And
what do you think?
Okay. My pick, so you took Daniel Ricciardo to Red Bull, and I think that's fair. I think he's going to Red Bull too. And I think there's a more than the fact that he's clearly back as a driver. He's a good driver. There is Steve always talks about this with goalies in hockey when we talk about it on the Steve Dangle podcast, which is the other show I do in case you don't watch hockey. And there's always a starting goalie and there's a backup goalie, just like there's a driver and a B driver in most teams, even though nobody admits it. And there is something to be said for the B driver putting the A driver or the B goalie putting the A goalie in their happy place. There are some people that do really well with competition, like Fernando Alonso. I don't think cares if another teammate likes him or doesn't, but he did leave Alpine and was not a fan of Esteban Ocon, right? Things are a lot more peaceful at Aston Martin, are they not?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then I think, and all of a sudden that sort of matters to Fernando. Hey, I don't have to fight my own teammate and do crazy stuff to get out of his way. It's great. With Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, it's not that Daniel wouldn't try to push Max, but I think there would be a pretty honest understanding that Max likes Daniel, enjoys his company. They would have fun together. Max is very serious. Daniel's very not, although he's very serious about driving, but he's a fun guy. And they would be able to keep both drivers in their happy place, and both of them would be happy with the finishes that they got. Right? They would race each other, but you wouldn't see the crashes that you would see. Like, remember like 2018, they crashed into each other? Like, that's probably not going to happen anymore. And if I'm Christian Horner and I know Daniel as well as I do, I probably get 2-3 good years out of him, and you're riding Max the entire way. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the most shocking is going to be wherever Carlos Sainz ends up. And I say that because I don't think I know there's the Audi connection. People keep bringing it up. I think if he has a good year, he's going to Mercedes. If he has a bad year, it could be back to Renault or Sauber. And so to me, if Carlos Sainz gets announced, I think that happens. And then I think the other move that happens if Carlos Sainz ends up at Mercedes, which is a bizarre move, I get it, is Logan Sargent. If he doesn't have a good year, Kimi Antonelli's going to Williams for at least a year or two. That's what I think happens.
Yep.
And that seems to be a good place for him. Now, my boy Alex Albon, I would love for him to get that Mercedes seat. But I feel like him and James Vowles are building something, and he might not want to go, and he is signed for 2025, and that was clarified today. So they'd have to break that contract, right?
Yeah, and all these drivers have out clauses in their contracts. It just depends, like, I guess what it has to do with, like, is it performance based? Is the team not living up to expectation? And if it comes down to a bigger offer, like, is he getting a bigger offer from somewhere else? Is that other team going to pay for the rest of the salary that's still left on the table that Williams would then have to still be paying? So there are a lot of things that go into it when it comes down to driver contracts, because they're so complex and convoluted. But I don't know. I guess I can ask James Vowles tomorrow. I'm having breakfast with him. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Please do. Hey, let me know if he has a coffee or not, because I know that he's like,
I will.
He saves his coffees for Sundays, or in this case, Saturday. I'm curious. All right, Tim. So let's go quickly for drivers and teams this weekend. Who are your top three going into Bahrain?
Obviously, like, we're going to go teams first. We'll go top three for teams. I'm going Red Bull, Ferrari, and I'm stuck between Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin. I'm stuck. It's like a log jam for third, I think.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pick one. I'm not letting you get away with it.
I'm gonna say Mercedes. Even though we don't know what they've got right now, I'm just gonna say Mercedes because it's Mercedes.
And it's Lewis and it's George, and they're great drivers.
Yeah, and okay. Lewis and George, yeah, for sure, 100%.
All right, now I'm gonna be a bit of a fan, a bit of a homer. Okay, so I'm gonna be. So first off, for interest's sakes,
I know it's.
I'm gonna say Red Bull makes a mistake. Okay, all right.
Okay.
So I'm going to say Charles Leclerc wins race one. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm saying I'm saying Max comes second and he's pissed. Yeah. And I'm saying Lando in third. All right.
Yeah.
Now okay. I know they haven't been that fast, but I'm going McLaren and I have to go McLaren in the homer. So in terms of teams, I'm saying Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, and then immediately after Mercedes, Aston Martin. That's what I think.
So, I mean, Adam, it's not like it's like a huge, like, it's, I like it a lot, and I hope it happens. But the thing is that, like, with this new sort of era of Formula One, like, it is, like, possible for us to have that if something happens to Verstappen, and that is totally possible, what you're saying, because, I mean, that's how close, the bottom 9 teams are going to be. Like, it is going to be super close. Like, we sit here and we say, like, hey, Alpine could be the slowest or the worst team on the grid, but we're talking like tenths now. We're not talking like back in the day of like seconds, like where teams were like 3 seconds off. We're talking tenths.
Yeah.
And that's what I think people really need to understand. Like, when we sit here and we say, hey, Haas is going to be brutal, they're going to be like dead last, but they may be dead last, but they may be like 7/10 off of third place or something.
Which,
like
given
that
their budget, is impressive, frankly.
Yes, exactly. 100%, Adam. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. But I like it. I really like it. I like it.
You like it. So your top 3 drivers, who wins? Who's second? Who's third?
I mean, I'm not going to go against Verstappen. There's just no way. Not going to go against Red Bull either. They just look way too good. Definitely, I'm going to go Verstappen. I'm going Leclerc. I'm going Sergio Perez. That's what I think.
Okay.
Or Carlos Sainz. I just think like Red Bull and Ferrari, they're really interesting right now. Especially Ferrari. Ferrari's just really interested in Ferrari right now.
Well, if you were to rate the drivers,
but they may not have anything, but I think they got something.
As a driver pair, like talent wise, I would say that most people would say Ferrari has a more balanced pair. The gap between Verstappen and Perez is much smaller than the gap between Leclerc and Sainz. So in those moments where you need Perez to beat Leclerc and beat Sainz, this is going to be a very interesting season. That part,
yes,
for sure,
absolutely,
right? Because if it's Max, but then
that's a great point.
Within like Charles and Carlos, if they're second and third every race, we could have a constructors battle.
Yes, absolutely. Like, there are some teams that are saying that if McLaren is able to be consistent and deliver on their upgrades, they could be a team that could also be in a constructors winning position as well. Like, I mean, there are people out there who are saying that, and so that's why I think it's so it's so important for, you know, those the big 5 or the big 4, however you want to place them, to get off on the right footing. And when you say Sergio Perez, you know, like, it's so important that guy has a good season, because these teams are going to be a lot closer. That means these teams are going to have more chances of taking points away from Red Bull. Max Verstappen can't win this Constructors' Championship on his own this year. He can't do it. I don't think that would be a possibility.
Oh, baby. So, Tim, I'm really looking forward to our first podcast after the first race in Bahrain.
Yeah,
we're going to have some fun, my friend. This is going to be a fun season. Now, don't forget to sign up for the SDPN official Grid Rival Pool. Shop Race Canada is going to kick in some prizes for 1, 2, and 3. Now, Tim's given you his predictions, so those are basically cheat codes. Definitely pick all the teams and drivers he picked. Maybe not the ones I did. I got lucky on Albon last year, let's be honest. But man, I love that Grid Rival. Every single week, I'm like, let's go, baby, let's go. So we're going to have some fun. And Tim, I'm really, really looking forward to this season. Lights out. Let's go racing, sir.
Yeah, man, it's going to be so much fun, Adam. I'm stoked. It's great to be here at Bahrain to cover the race. It's been an awesome trip so far. I learned a lot. It's been incredible. Yeah, I'm really excited for this weekend, and I am super excited to sit down and talk a race debrief with you on Saturday, because it's going to be incredible.
Let's do it, buddy.